Hi and good morning to everyone who is joining us today. I've got Josie here. We're also hopefully going to go live on Facebook if I can get that right. How are you doing, Josie?
I'm fine, thank you. Fine. Wishing I was out in the sunshine, actually.
Yeah, I am going out in the sunshine later, you know.
Well, I will be doing after this, yes.
But in fact, you know,
probably a gin and tonic.
no, I'm going swimming.
Oh, swimming? Are you?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, I didn't know that was allowed.
It is in open water.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think, yeah, we are just about to go live on Facebook, which is fantastic. So welcoming everyone that we've got here today. I'm Rosemary Farrow, I'm from Think Tree Hub, and we've got here the lovely Josie Whiteley. Hi, Josie. Hi. So Josie is going to talk us through really how we lead in a time of change. She's a leadership expert, Josie. She's focusing on how we lead and navigate our time ahead. This is really for anyone who's self-employed. You might run a small business. You might be a manager in a larger company. It doesn't really matter, as Josie said, because so many roles need good leadership skills, and particularly kind of ethical leadership skills, because we're in uncharted water to a certain degree of, and how do we make wise decisions? That's the really big thought, especially with high anxiety levels. So Josie's used to delivering a lot of practical workshops and online training to everybody who wants to learn how to lead in an ethical way. So Josie, I'll be handing over to you in a minute. There is going to be a chance for Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions, do just pop them in the Q&A box, which you should be able to see somewhere at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on what you're watching us on. Or if you're on Facebook, then just pop it in Facebook and I'll pick it up from there. Otherwise, pop it in chat. And I'll put those questions to Josie at the end. Okay, Josie, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosemary. Well, yes, welcome to this webinar about leading in a time of change. It does feel very timely actually this week that this is happening today, because we're in Mental Health Awareness Week, which started on Monday. And I understand that about 25% of people in the UK are affected by mental health problems, which I'm certain will have been made worse by the current pandemic that we're all coping with. So I think it's really timely, and one of the hashtags that they're using on social media for Mental Health Awareness Week is kindness matters. And this webinar is going to focus on the importance of being kind when you're leading in an ethical way, whatever your job role. It's achievable whether you're an employee and a colleague, whether you're a manager or a leader, and it does make a difference because you're responsible for your behaviours. So if you choose to be unkind just for the sake of being mean to somebody, or because you're so focused on getting to a certain goal and not imagining the repercussions that could have on other people, you need to consider your actions in the context of how's it affecting others. Having said that, we're not perfect. So when I'm talking about being kind, you know, I don't expect all of us to get this right straight away. We're not perfect. None of us is perfect. And we can only try to do our best. So, for example, I've not been well for the last couple of days with food poisoning of all things. So I'm certainly not feeling as energised as I would have hoped I would have done by today's session. But I'll be doing my best in those circumstances, and that's all that we can do. And we don't have to be perfect, but we have to be good enough and know that we're really trying hard to do our best. So, as Rosemary said, I've been a manager and a leader in journalism and in education, and for the last 6 years I've run my own business, Joe Communication, where I do consultancy work, interim management, leadership training. I've recently branched into online training and webinars, which are still quite a new thing for me. In my spare time, I run a local arts charity, and I'm also trustee of a meditation centre, which we discovered a couple of months ago we would very quickly have to adapt the way we worked at the centre, and put some of our courses and sessions online. And I have to say that's been a bit of a godsend in these difficult times, because I've been able to attend online meditation sessions, and that really has helped to lower my stress levels. So if I can actually manage to share my screen, my computer is always a little temperamental. Hopefully I'll be able to share it, and I do have about 5 or 6 screens I'd like to share with you, because I do know that some people like visuals. We're not all auditory learners, so I've put some information on the slides to help those people. This image is a photograph taken from my front garden. It's one of my trees that I really love, and I love trees. I like to think of them as always being strong and nurturing of the creatures that live in and around them. And I like to talk about an analogy of managers and leaders, or company business owners, being the roots and the trunk of a strong tree. And you need firm roots and a blossom to be healthy. So if you've got strong managers and leaders, then the branches are your staff, the leaves will be your customers, and the blossom is the products that you're selling or the services that you're selling. If you think of it in an education context, where I spent 20 years of my life, the students are the leaves. Again, the staff are the branches, the students are the leaves, and their successors are the blossom. And I think that's really quite a powerful image. Certainly, I know these things don't work for everybody, but in my head, it works well, and it feels as if we're in a storm right now. We're heading towards a huge economic storm. We're obviously in the health storm that we're all trying to cope with. So if you think about yourself as a tree, you know, has your tree lost its blossom right now? Has it lost its leaves? Has it lost some of its branches? We can't ignore the work that we do in a time like this, but suddenly it perhaps becomes a little less important if we have lost a family member, for example. That is going to take immediate priority. But for those of you who are business owners and are responsible for employing people, you will want to keep your businesses running. You will want to, even if they're not running right now, and if you've had to furlough staff, what you will want is to be able to come back revitalised if possible. So we have to be prepared to adapt, and we have to be prepared to change and deal with the circumstances we're facing. And I think viewing yourself as an ethical leader, somebody who genuinely cares about their staff and their team, can take you an awfully long way in surviving this current pandemic. So what do I mean by ethical leadership? It isn't obvious to everybody. Let's see if we can get up, if I can just move that. Okay. So what is ethical leadership? I really like this quote. I think it's quite powerful, and the words have been carefully chosen. So leadership's not about a person or a position. It's a complex moral relationship between people based on trust, obligation, commitment, emotion, and a shared vision of the good. And as a business leader, hopefully you're sitting there thinking, well, yes, that's me. That's what I do. I don't see it as a person or a position. It's just me, my business, my team that helped business be successful, and we trust each other, and we have obligations to each other, commitment, and we have a shared vision of what we want to achieve that hopefully is good. So that's a general overview of what ethical leadership is, quite a simple explanation. There are many forms of leadership. If you Google how many styles of leadership are there, you'll find at least 50. Sadly, not all of them are ethical. One that actually really resonates with me is called the 4 V's model of ethical leadership, and it was created about 30 years ago by a gentleman called Dr. Bill Grace. In the States, he founded the Centre of Ethical Leadership and created it to be a catalyst for creating a just society. And he describes ethical leadership as the alignment of the internal with the external for the purpose of advancing the common good. Now, what he's referring to there is the internal, being your values and beliefs as an individual, and the external being your actions and behaviours. So if we add those explanations into that quote, ethical leadership's the alignment of the internal, which are your values and beliefs, with the external, your actions and behaviours, for the purpose of advancing the common good. Now, what you will see that those two quotes have in common is this idea of the common good, a shared vision of the good. Because I would say whatever your business is, whatever company you work in, whatever your job is, if you're not doing something ethically, if you're not doing something purposefully, if you're not doing something that matters, then actually what is the point? Because what we all want in our lives is to have a happy life, a healthy life, a good life. And if we're being sidetracked by the things that are less ethical and less good, why would we allow ourselves to go there? In my view, the main goal of an ethical leader is to create a positive and inclusive future and to help everybody reach the potential. And that includes, if you're a teacher, every one of your students. If you're a boss, that includes all of your staff. So looking at what the 4 V's are in a little more detail, they stand for 4 words: values, vision, voice and virtue. And again, you can see a pattern here because the last one, virtue, is standing for the common good. So your values, they're your personal and organisational beliefs which lead to your behaviours. So if you believe in honesty and integrity and accountability and having compassion for others, then hopefully that comes through in how you behave in your life, personally and professionally. I discovered that was a real positive of being self-employed. So those of you out there who are self-employed will perhaps understand this when I say I've refused work over the last 6 years because it hasn't aligned with my values. It's less easy to do that when you're employed, but certainly that's been a real positive of self-employment for me. So values are the first V. The second, vision. What should your organisation be doing now? What should it be doing in the future? Where are you going? Are things going to change? Are you hoping that they'll stay the same? Because I'm not an expert in this, but I would guess many things are not going to stay the same. So you need to have a plan for that. The third V is voice, and that's about articulating your vision to others. So it could be to your clients, your customers, or to your workforce. How do you speak in a way that inspires them to action? And it also includes speaking out when you see some wrongdoing or something that you think is unethical. So for example, if you were a cosmetics industry or a cosmetics business and you discovered one of your suppliers was testing makeup on animals, for example, and you didn't believe in that, then it would be your duty as an ethical leader and manager to speak out against that and to find a new supplier. As I said earlier, virtue in the 4 V's, the 4th V stands for virtue, the common good. And this is about being an ethical business and minimising harm. And whether that's minimising harm to yourself as an individual, to your staff, to your customers, or to the planet, it's a focus about minimising harm and doing good. So you might be thinking right now, well, this is all well and good, but I can't really see how this is relevant to me. But I'm encouraging you to think about, as we move forward, making sure that you're doing the right thing in your working life. So perhaps ask some questions of yourself to decide whether you can truly be an ethical leader. You know, who are you? What do you care about? What matters to you most of all? And what do you put first? What do you prioritise? Do you prioritise money or do you prioritise people? And who are your role models in business and in your personal life? I think those answers sometimes can be quite telling and perhaps rather surprising. So if you're not really sure about being an ethical leader and why anybody would bother, then let me show you how being thoughtful and ethical can impact on your business. Just bear with me. There we go. Eventually, I knew we'd get there. I have faith. Okay, so what are some of the benefits to your business? An ethical leadership style creates a healthier workplace culture, an emphasis on being conscientious, that's from both management and staff, an inclusive workplace, a culture of accountability, and a consistent workplace. And what that does is it creates a safe environment for people that you work with, a safe and caring environment. It also makes sure that you follow the law because you want to do the right thing. And it allows problems such as accidents, for example, to be reported and dealt with more quickly and appropriately. So again, as we said earlier, it's about minimising harm, doing the right thing, making the right choices, creating a healthy culture. And it can be the little things. I went to a college as an interim manager and I was there for a term, and I walked in the staff room and they had a big fridge full of bottles of milk. And I thought, oh goodness, you know, I wanted to make myself a coffee and asked a member of staff how I could. Oh yes, well, all that milk in the fridge, that's for the staff. I said, what do you mean that's for the staff? Oh yeah, we get free fresh milk every morning. And I was quite overwhelmed by that because the previous college I'd been at didn't do that. You provided that for yourself. So I got rather stupidly excited with the prospect of some free milk to put in my coffee every day. So that can help create a healthy workplace culture. And it shows that you care for your staff. They feel treated and feel treated well and supported in the work. They feel they're respected for what they do. And they don't feel discriminated against in any way and know that you'll treat them fairly. They also perhaps get a feeling from an ethical workplace that you're not going to blame them for things that are not their fault. Yes, if they do something wrong, correct them appropriately and be firm but fair in that. But don't blame them for things, don't pass the buck if it's your fault or another colleague's fault. You'll get back from that is you'll find out that they trust you. And in my experience, that's true of members of you to do their best for you and for the business. If you're thinking, oh, my staff don't do that, well, that could be because of one of two things. Maybe you're falling down in some of the traits we've just discussed, or maybe you've employed the wrong people. Either way, you can make changes to move to that more ethical workplace should you choose to do so. One thing that I think is really key for us all to remember at this time is that you will have team members and colleagues who've been really badly affected during the last few months. They may have been bereaved, they may have had the virus themselves, and they may have survived but taken a little time to recover. So what can you do for them moving forward? Can you alter working practices, give them different, more appropriate shifts, PPE if that's appropriate? Can you keep your business online a little longer to support them, allow some to work from home or some to remain on furlough? And acknowledge that there may be reasons why they're very unsure about coming back to work in this time. For example, they may live with a vulnerable family member. So can you make adjustments for them so that they can cope when they have to come back to work full time? So if I can move on to my next slide. This is how I would hope every manager and every leader leads, with both their head and their heart. So in the context of the journey that we're all on now, nationally and internationally, we're all going through a period of change, and change is always difficult. I've been through a lot of change in my life in various contexts, and it's never easy, never easy. Even if you're the person who instigates the change, the chances are that there'll be some period of stress linked with actually adapting to that change. It's not easy. So if you can use head and heart together to get you down that road to where you need to be, and remember that your head is the logical side, so that relates to all the practical ways of running your business, and your heart is your emotional centre, the way that you communicate with people, the way that you are able to stay calm, the way that you connect with your staff and customers. I did a course recently on Facebook about using Facebook groups to gain engagement for businesses, and the person who ran it she kept talking about connecting and connections. And if I'm brutally honest, it actually became a little bit tedious. And I got a bit fed up of hearing it. But actually it did its job because it stuck in my head. And if you think about it, connections we have with other people, it's all part of and important to the human condition. It's relevant to our relationships with everyone, from our family and friends to our staff and customers. And actually loyalty that your staff may have to you as a manager and a leader, and the loyalty that your customers have to you, that again comes from connection. If there is no connection, they'll just not come to you. They'll go elsewhere, either as an employee or as a customer. So if we have a little think about what our new normal will look like, well, one of the things that you're going to have to do if you haven't done already is think long and hard about what that new world will be. I'm aware some people have been living in a state of anxiety for weeks now, and you have to try and take control of that to become emotionally resilient and emotionally intelligent. And as it says on the slide, those are two key things, and they're not the same things. Some people think they're the same thing and they're not. Emotional resilience, mental health charity Mind describes that as your ability to bounce back, but also your capacity to adapt in the face of challenging circumstances whilst maintaining a stable mental well-being. And that's really quite tough, actually. It's quite an achievement to be able to do that. So it's not just, I think sometimes we talk about resilience in people and it's just that assumption, it's that they can bounce back, and it isn't just that. It's about being able to adapt to change, being able to cope with that and get through that whilst remaining mentally well, which can be really difficult. So you might be thinking, well, I've got emotional resilience in buckets. That's great if you have, but what about your colleagues? What about your staff? What about your team? What are their priorities on a daily basis? You may, if you're a business owner, you may have some money in the bank that you can call on at this time. If you're an employee and you're living virtually on the breadline, that might not be the case. If you're furloughed and you're on 80% salary, perhaps that isn't enough to pay the bills. And for those of you who are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, imagine a pyramid shape, and at the bottom, Maslow talks about physiological needs being the key thing that's of most importance to all creatures, actually, not just humans. Food, water, shelter. If you haven't got those things in place, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter whether you're going to get a great job next month or next year if you haven't got food and water and somewhere safe to sleep. One of the other things in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is job security, health security. And a lot of us at this time haven't got those things. So don't make assumptions. This can sometimes be one of my weaknesses, assuming things. Don't make assumptions that other people like you can get by because they've got a little bit of money saved up in the bank, because that's not true of everybody. And you might have colleagues on your team who are in quite a tough place at the moment. So you have to be realistic with your expectations of your colleagues in this time. Because they may not be as emotionally resilient as you. Moving on to emotional intelligence, now that's something that an American psychologist, Daniel Goleman, helped popularise some years ago. And actually, it's very, very important in the field of leadership. Three key leadership qualities that he identified were integrity, empathy, and emotional self-control. And if you think about it as a leader, just the simplest definitions of those words, integrity is acting consistently with core values. Empathy, do you care about your team? Do you read and understand their emotional reality? Are you prepared to make adjustments for them when required? And emotional self-control, can you as the manager and the leader respond calmly and wisely in difficult situations? If, for example, you find when you come through this time that you might have to make some people redundant, if you're acting with integrity when you're doing that, if you employ 10 people and 2 of them are family members and 6 of them are friends, and the other 2 were employed by you but had no other connection, you don't just get rid of those 2. that would not be acting with integrity. It's about being fair and treating people properly. So if you had to make redundancies, what you would have to consider and plan for is, of those 10 people, right, these are the 8 jobs that I now need doing, and we need to pick the best 8 from those 10, not just the ones who are your friends or your family members. Emotional self-control as well. If you're leading, if you can lead by example and be a good role model for your staff in this time, and not in a panic, and respond calmly, they will feel reassured. They will feel reassured that you, as the captain of the ship, that you're actually in control and not floundering on the ocean. So Dr. Grace, who founded the Centre for Ethical Leadership, when he talked about the alignment of internal values and actions and behaviour, I think one of the things he was saying is that you need to demonstrate emotional intelligence and resilience. You need to demonstrate integrity and empathy. And right now, you need to be what your staff need at this time, because every single one of them will be different. We're all different. We're all unique in our own way. So what works for one member of staff might not work for the other, and you need to be aware of that. So in all this talk about getting back to normal, I'll attempt to stop sharing that. This getting back to normal, ask yourself, as a manager or a business owner or as an employee, is what was normal where you want to be? Because certainly my view is that I don't necessarily want my new normal to be the same as my old normal. Is that true for you? If you do want normal to stay the same, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But think about times of change and turbulence. Now could be the best time ever to make changes you've always wanted to do. So whatever that might be, it might be something that's on your bucket list that you want to do, that you've never had the chance to do before, and you've realised now as you've been stuck at home that actually that chance might have been taken away from you. So make decisions moving forward for your business and for your life about things that you're going to do that matter to you, that are important. One of the changes that I've done over these last few weeks is I was very disappointed to miss some conferences and workshops I was supposed to be delivering, but I filled some of my days with sewing scrubs bags for the NHS, because I suddenly remembered I could sew, and I did possess a sewing machine, even if it was in the loft. So I've been sewing them from old duvet covers. Have you been able to do something positive for your community in this time? Have you seen a different approach to doing things? Is it something that's made you? Certainly I don't want to be a seamstress. I'm not that good. That's not going to be my new career. But whatever it is that you've been doing in that time might be something where you think, actually, I'm really connected with that job or that role or the people I've been working with as a volunteer. And that's something I'd like to do moving forward. So we don't all have to sort of hibernate in this period, assuming that normal will be the same as it always was moving forward. And I think allowing ourselves the chance to make changes and accept changes can be really a very powerful thing to do. And it can give you time to be kind to yourself, to your team, and to the planet. So my next image, fingers crossed, is, there it is. What will your new normal look like? So we've got some priorities and then looking towards the future. So I hope, if you're a business owner, that you had some kind of disaster plan in place. I remember when I first became a manager, being asked to create a disaster plan. Firstly, I'd got no idea what it was, and secondly, I couldn't really understand why it was required. And I was working at a college, and I just said, so what am I imagining? That a plane lands on the building where my department is? And the answer was yes. Yes, imagine that. What would happen if all your equipment was wiped out and you hadn't physically got a space to teach? And this was before the days of all the technology we've got now to work online. So that's what I did, and I imagined that. So I'm hoping that if you've got a business, you've had a plan in place and that you're working through that and it's working for you now. Because actually we are going through rather disastrous times, aren't we? No, a plane hasn't landed on top of us, but it's kind of an equivalent in some ways. Be prepared to be adaptable with yourself, with your business, with your staff, take each day as it comes and work on being as positive as you can. And when you're thinking about the future, start with a blank piece of paper. Don't make assumptions about anything. I love mind maps, so I just write in the middle of a blank piece, me and my business, or whatever it is I'm mapping, and then just draw some lines out from that central point and just jot down ideas and thoughts. If you're a list person, just create a list of things that you want to do in the future with your business, with your career, with your life. It's actually a really rewarding feeling when you get to actually tick the list, tick the items off on your list. It's one of my very favourite things. Be prepared for the fact that some things can't change, and what you can do in that circumstance, if you're unhappy about that, is you can change your responses and your reactions to whatever's happening or to the crisis in particular. But while you're going through the process, remember to do the right thing by you and your business. You know, your reputation in business is important. So don't suddenly start behaving in a way that, had we not been in this crisis, you would never have dreamed of behaving. And that includes how you treat your customers as well as your staff. Connections, obviously, I said it's stuck in my head, this idea of connections. Communication is key with all your connections. So whether you are regularly putting something on social media, whether you're emailing, or whether you're in a WhatsApp group with members of your staff, keep communicating, keep them in the loop, let them have a shared vision of where your business is going so they can feel some ownership of it as you move forward. That will bear fruit in the long run. And if you have customers that at the moment you're unable to serve, then keep connecting with them, and whether that's through email, whether it's through a Facebook page or online in some other way. Things like, sharing our Facebook page, just there's a prize, you'll go in a draw for a prize, and it can be something simple. People love that kind of thing. So do that, keep that connection going. I've seen some really good examples on Facebook of businesses doing that. The nature of their business means they can't trade at the moment, but they're giving out gift vouchers, prizes for future treatments, for example, in the spa. So that's not rocket science, is it? That's about thinking about people, what makes people tick and what people like and what they value. So if you're an employee now rather than a business owner and you're thinking about future plans, has it occurred to you that your current job might not be right for you? That now might be the time that you want to change? You've learned a new skill, as we've already discussed in the last couple of months, and you'd really like to develop a new career. Do you feel the same as before the pandemic struck? And does what you do or what you did, does it matter more now or does it matter less? Has it suddenly become quite insignificant and unimportant in the bigger scheme of things? What's really, really important to you personally? So as an example, have you managed to live on less money? Have you found yourself out of work, or have you found yourself being furloughed or being self-employed and waiting for money that is due to come through this week, I believe? How have you managed? If you've managed to live on less money than you could, does that mean that you actually need to earn less? And you perhaps could do a less stressful job because you can live on less? Have you created less waste for the planet? Have you spent more time thinking about recycling, for example? Have you, when you're shopping and you're doing one shop a week, have you been more careful in what you've bought? Have you made sure that you've had no food waste in your family? Because A, it's too expensive to throw away, and B, you don't want to go to the shops more than once a week. Have you repaired something or upcycled something? So you can get a real sense of achievement out of doing some of those things, and just think, is it possibly showing you the way for a new career moving forward? So be absolutely clear, your new normal will be personal to you, because we've all had different and personal experiences these last few months. Think about the positives that you've gained from it, because there will have been some. It may be you've been able to reconnect with family because you're working at home or you're homeschooling. Have you enjoyed being able to work from home? and being able to have more flexible hours? Is it something that you'd want to pursue going forward? And if you're a business owner, has that worked for you and your business? Because actually costs could be saved there if you need a smaller premises because people are hot desking. Bear in mind and think about, as we go forward into this new normal, those people around you who will have been bereaved during this time and perhaps been ill with COVID-19 and could be taking some months to recover, because they will have had perhaps a change of viewpoint. A couple of years ago, I spent some nights in hospital for the first time ever, and there were times I was laid in the bed thinking, am I actually going to ever go home? And it was really frightening, actually. So there will be people who've been through that experience, and you need to be mindful about that and view it as it's something you need to support your staff with, but you can help them do that by being flexible and working in different ways. I actually attended a Think Tree Hub webinar about a month ago or so ago, and the presenter was a hypnotherapist, and she ran individual sessions online and was talking about this and how it worked and how it was great now we were in this pandemic situation. I had absolutely no idea that that could be done. That was one of the things that made me realise that the meditation centre where I'm a trustee could potentially go online, because actually it could work online. I'd never thought about that before. So open your mind to the possibilities, because there are many, many, many possibilities out there. And there's always a way forward. It might not necessarily be what you expect, but there will be a way forward. So I'm just going to try and have a drink while I open my final image. Okay. So whatever decisions you need to make as a result of dealing with this pandemic, whether it's redundancies, whether you're deciding that actually your business was very small, it was struggling to survive, and you're actually going to fold and do something different, that's absolutely fine. Make sure that you do whatever you're doing with compassion. People, the staff you work with, the staff that you lead, will remember the way you treat them in this time, and they will remember if you treat them badly. There's no need to treat anybody badly. And every time you do treat somebody badly, then that causes some damage. And even if the damage isn't visible, it doesn't mean it's not there. So please make sure that if you have to make people redundant and so on, you're doing it in a fair and legal and appropriate way, and that you're treating people with compassion and empathy. Whilst understanding that you're not perfect yourself, you're not superhuman, and as a leader, I accept and understand fully that you'll be going through your own stressful times. There's a lot of truth in an old saying. I think Benjamin Franklin said it: if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And I think that planning moving forward is really key to what you're doing now. As I said, involve your staff, involve your teams in that planning so they can become a part of what you're doing. And now a final image, because at the end of the day, what I've put on this image I think are key. They're key things in life and they're key things in business. So every night when you put the news on, have you seen what people are saying is the most stressful part of lockdown? You know, not being able to see people you love, not being able to give grandma a hug. We've realised that it is that human interaction and that connection that we're missing out on, and therefore if we're missing it, that means it's really important in our lives. So have you realised that people matter more than things? And again, this could have a bearing on your business. Depending if you're a manufacturer, you might find you're making things that there's little call for moving forward, because people might decide they just don't need your product anymore, and then you will have to adapt and change. We all have busy lives. Certainly up to lockdown, we all had very busy lives in our jobs and so on. But did you take time for your family, for your friends, for your hobbies, for exercise, for holidays, for yourself, just to have some quiet downtime, to have a nice relaxing bath or read a good book? Did you always live your values? Did you always have positivity and energy? Did you always treat people well? Were you always a good role model to people around you? Did you make sure that your staff had an acceptable workload? And did you previously allow flexible working hours? If you didn't, maybe the experience through lockdown has showed you that it's possible, that you can trust people. Working from home, we don't have to be sitting at a desk in an office 9 to 5. We can work at home, and we're all adults, and we can behave in an appropriately professional way to do that. Do you allow your workforce to have a proper balance in their life, or are you very demanding? Remember to breathe. One thing I'm very bad at is breathing. And I can feel myself if I'm nervous or a little bit panicky about something, I can feel myself, the breath is all up here instead of actually, and if I just stop for a moment and take a very, very deep breath, and I do that 2 or 3 times, I immediately feel 100% better. So do that, encourage your staff to do that, to take time for themselves to be quiet and calm. If you have tough decisions to make them with a clear head and a kind heart, and people will remember that you've done that. So, key messages from this session is to treat others as you'd always want to be treated yourself, to be firm but fair in anything that you have to do personally and professionally, such as redundancies. Always have a plan. It will change, everything changes, but make sure you've at least got one. Decide what your values are, and that's something for you to do after this webinar. Sit down and have a good think about that. Decide what your values are and then live up to them in life and business. And don't worry about being perfect, because perfect is really, really difficult to achieve, and doing your best is good enough. So finally, the tree in my garden. It was on the first image I shared with you. Beautiful tree, beautiful pink blossom every year. About 3 years ago, it was actually badly burned. 3 years ago, yes. Some hooligans, yobs, I was trying to think what to call them. Vandals, I think is the word. Some vandals at 3 o'clock one morning decided to set fire to my wheelie bins, which I put out on the pavement, and they went up in a huge blaze, and part of the tree was badly burned. 3 years later, it is still recovering, but it's survived. And I want you to take that forward as a message. Whatever difficult circumstances you're in now, we will get through it. You will get through it. Your staff and your colleagues and your family will get through it. Just try to keep breathing, keep calm, keep positive, remain adaptable, and think about my tree. It has taken 3 years for it to recover, but this year the blossom was absolutely beautiful. So I hope that's been helpful. And if there are any questions, I'm hoping that Rosemary may have been looking at them on the Q&A.
Okay, hi Josie, thank you for that. That was great. Do you know, funny enough, it was only, I think this morning, there was an amazing post on LinkedIn. I was going to say LinkedIn actually, but LinkedIn. When you were talking, I thought I'd found it. It's a guy called Armando Koch, who is a scientist somewhere in America. And he said, you know, exactly what you said. Why do we need to go back to work, meaning the old ways, to produce again millions of things we don't need and which don't make us happy, pollute the oceans with plastic and the air with CO2? Why again do we need millions of new cars per year? Why can't we build things that are sustainable and reliable for decades? Yeah,
absolutely.
And
yeah, I wish I'd had that quote. I would have quoted it. That is exactly
my pleasure to quote it for you.
Yes, thank you.
And I think the one thing about technology that we have now is that we have more options than we ever did after pandemics. There are actually new ways of working, and food production that don't put us back where we, you know, have gone after absolutely every other pandemic, plague, etc.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, if you look comparatively at how we handle a situation like this today with how it was handled in, 100 years ago, or even if you get back, God forbid, to 1665. Yeah, we are actually streets ahead. No matter what anybody says, anyone moans, the truth is we're streets ahead because of the technological advantages, but also because of the ethical advantages.
Yeah.
Not advantages, which is exactly what you've been saying. And I noted particularly, what you were not saying. What you were not saying was the opposite. Where you were was a very cynical space, and that is almost. Do you feel what we have a chance to move away from?
Yeah. So the problem with talking about the cynical space is it's about labelling people who may have been listening as unethical leaders, as people who don't care about the planet and don't care about others, which is, it's hard to do that. I didn't want to do that. I don't want people to feel downhearted or that they're bad people in some way, but what I wanted to encourage is that they would think about different ways. I mean, the food waste was a key thing for me. I suddenly discovered when I went self-employed, I realised that my full-time job, which was very, very long hours and very stressful, firstly, it made me ill. Secondly, I used to run to the shop and buy food and stuff the fridge, and I'd come home from work every night and drink a couple of glasses of wine and then start cooking a meal at 8:30. And by the end of the week, half the food would be out of date, and I'd throw half the food away and then I'd start again. And I went self-employed, which is always a scary thing to do, and those self-employed people out there will understand what I mean by that. But my food shopping bill halved. Now, admittedly, by the end of the week, I was eating some strange concoctions sometimes because I became determined not to waste a single thing. But actually, from the planet's perspective, my food footprint had halved, and it has saved me money. So it is possible to make those changes. And now that comes as second nature to me now. I still won't throw anything away. That might be why I had food poisoning a couple of days ago. I might have to rethink that.
I don't know, Josie, but at least your immune system will probably be stronger if it was, I suppose when I said the cynical, it was I was thinking more in terms of like narratives, like the kind of films that are chucked out with this is how you're supposed to think, this is how you're supposed to be. And we're going, we actually need a different narrative, and it's getting that narrative out, so we stop making the same assumptions that we had based on the narrative that we think we fit into.
Yes.
Steve,
have I got time to share a very quick? Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to give you a question. Steve Cooper, hi Steve. Actually says, how can we get the vitally important questions about ethical leadership to our politicians? I'm thinking about holding them to account, not just through CV19, but going forward as a society. That's something you can answer in 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you, Steve, for that question. Yes, that's a very good question. If I'm truthful, I don't really know the answer to that. I think there are a number of politicians who are very concrete thinkers, and they are unable to think outside the box. They have an ideology that they follow, and they can't think outside the box, and they can't, everything I've just been talking about adaptability and change, they're not good at that at all. They're not flexible, and they will have some kind of mantra and they'll repeat it, and we're all expected to buy into that. They think that if they say it often enough, we'll all agree with it. And obviously that isn't the case. Ethical leadership is about having values, have good values, and having some morals and having some standards. And I do feel currently our politicians, many of them, are not the people that, if it was up to me, I would choose. And this isn't a political party thing at all. It's about the kinds of people that they are. Are they kind? Are they compassionate? Are they truthful? Do they have integrity? And many of them don't. And what happens is that the ones that do somehow seem to become the odd ones out, and they're the ones who are seen as being peculiar. the peculiar politicians, which I find quite strange. I mean, I have to say, my ethical leadership online course, which is the basics of ethical leadership, which you can access through the Thinktree Hub website, I did actually send the link to our Prime Minister last week, because I thought he may find it helpful. So that's, in my own small way, how I'm trying to have an impact with our politicians. But I think we have a huge challenge, and I don't really think I've got the answers. I think what the problem is we've got many of the wrong people in politics, and that's the way we change it. And maybe it's people with my ethical stance and beliefs, people like me who need to put themselves forward for election, so that we end up with the right politicians in power.
I think I think you've just hit the nail on the head. Well, Steve says good answer.
Good. Oh, I'm glad he likes that. Thank you, Steve.
I think that's so true. You know, how many people do you, if you ask them, are there any politicians you really respect at the moment? Any party, any viewpoint, very little.
Yeah.
Very little. There, you know, there isn't that, as you said. It's just wherever you come from. It's also a one track from school, to the right uni, to the right degree, straight into politics. There isn't the time mostly to develop that ethical leadership and that view and that kindness and that compassion, because it doesn't fit in with the path they've taken. They haven't, you know, lived a life. It's terribly just competitive, and that's it. It's not, where's the bigger picture, where's conviction? Where's conviction?
And if you've spent your childhood in a wealthy family, and you've been to Eton, and then you went to Oxford, and you've never had the need to be compassionate, because the kinds of people that you mix with are all your kind of people who can have everything that they want. I don't know. Yes. Hopefully I did hit the nail on the head. So Rosemary, people like me, you and Steve clearly need to stand for election the next time there is one. Do we have any other questions?
Not at the moment, but again, I didn't even have had to, well, okay.
I'm quite relieved, because that was quite a hard question.
Actually. It was a really, really hard question. I'll give you one little thing, I think, and it's the mantra which was keep on coming into my head, because we are the problem. Yeah, every time we also offload stuff to politicians, we are forgetting our personal responsibility, like you said, in just filling the fridge with stuff that gets thrown away, making unnecessary journeys in the car. You know, at the minute we have loads of bees around us, more than we normally had. Pollution is down. I think the two things are probably listed. Do you want bees? Bees give you food. You want to survive? You need bees.
Absolutely.
So it's us. Every single time we make a decision to do journeys, to pollute that we don't need, to buy cheap rubbish that we don't need, instead of thinking kind and compassionately through the whole net of being, we are, I suppose, keeping the whole issue going. So the issue always starts at ground, doesn't it, Josie?
It does.
It always starts at ground, because sometimes if we haven't, as you said, got ethical leaders in place necessarily, I'm sure there are some, but I don't see a lot of conviction, then it's almost like the kind of, the ethical leadership needs almost to be shown by people at grassroots level until it changes.
It does, and that takes courage, actually. That does take courage, especially if you've got a leader who isn't very ethical and you're trying to be, because they won't necessarily understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. So that actually can be quite tough and challenging. But can I just say, if anyone is interested in following me on Facebook, I do have a Facebook page, Jaw Communication, and I do have a website, which is jawcommunication.co.uk, and you can access my online courses and my workshops, more details, and my email address if you want to get in touch with me on there.
Okay. Brilliant. So I'm just putting that in the chat. So brilliant. Thank you everybody for joining to us today. Everybody who watches the recording of this. If you want to get in touch with Josie again, go to her Facebook page, Jaw Communication, drop her a message, she'll get back to you, or have a look at have a look at her website. Jo says, thanks Josie, I joined it late, missed the first 20 messages, really enjoyed what I saw, very well presented and thought-provoking content and words as always. And that's from Jo Thornton.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jo.
So again, thank you so much for your insight and your plain speaking, Josie, and you've given people a lot to think about. And again, I think you said you've got something on Thinktree Hub as well, so people can go there and take a look. That's wonderful. So bye everybody, see you again soon. Look out for our next presentations and get in touch with Josie. Bye.
Thank you. Bye everybody. Thanks.